The lights blazed brightly in the sleek Manhattan studio of The Night Spot, one of the most watched late-night talk shows across America. Host Chloe Reynolds, known for her biting sarcasm and sharp-tongued jabs at public figures, leaned back in her leather chair. The audience, a lively mix of young professionals and political junkies, murmured with excitement. Tonight, the guest was none other than Sunita Williams, the trailblazing astronaut who had just returned from a challenging 6-month mission on the International Space Station, ISS. The screens behind Chloe flashed images of Sunita floating weightlessly in space, some serene, others depicting the hardships of zero gravity. But Chloe, as always, had her own spin to put on things. As the camera panned to Sunita's poised figure, dressed in a crisp navy blazer and an American flag pin, the audience clapped politely. She adjusted her posture with military precision, betraying nothing of the exhaustion still lingering from her return to Earth. "So, Sunita," Chloe began, flipping her blonde hair with an exaggerated sigh. 6 months in the cold, unforgiving void of space. Sounds like a vacation from the mess down here, huh? A ripple of laughter coursed through the audience. Sunita smiled patiently. "Well, Chloe, space is fascinating, but I wouldn't call it a vacation. It's a constant test of endurance, focus, and teamwork." Chloe arched an eyebrow. Sure, but come on. Didn't you have a couple of mishaps up there?" Her voice dripped with mockery as the screens behind her played a clip of Sunita struggling with a malfunctioning control panel during a spacewalk. "Tell us, how does a NASA veteran like you mess up something so simple?" The crowd laughed harder, sensing blood in the water. Sunita's smile didn't falter. She folded her hands neatly in her lap and tilted her head slightly. "You know, Chloe," she said, her tone calm yet steely, "space isn't exactly like hosting a talk show. When you're orbiting the Earth at 17,500 miles per hour, even a minor equipment error can become a life-or-death situation." Chloe's smile flickered for a split second, but she pressed on. "Oh, no doubt. I mean, it must be so tough floating around while the rest of us are stuck in traffic." She rolled her eyes theatrically. "But, let's be honest. Did you ever think, hey, maybe I'm not cut out for this anymore? I mean, you did almost lose control of the robotic arm, right?" A murmur of unease stirred the audience. Sunita leaned forward slightly, her voice low and unwavering. "I didn't almost lose control. I took control when it mattered most," she said. "That arm weighs over 900 pounds on Earth. In zero gravity, it moves with the touch of a fingertip, but it doesn't mean it's easy. Takes skill and precision. And in that moment, my entire training came down to a decision that ensured the safety of the station and my crew." Chloe smirked. Okay, no need to get all Top Gun on me," she quipped, causing scattered laughs. "But humor me, was there ever a point where you thought, I'm too old for this?" Sunita let a pause hang in the air before answering. "Age isn't a limitation when you're prepared," she said firmly. "NASA doesn't choose astronauts based on how young or flashy they are. They choose people who can handle unimaginable pressure and still get the job done. And last time I checked, I'm still doing exactly that." A few audience members clapped more sincerely this time, but Chloe wasn't finished. "Fair enough," Chloe said, leaning in with a gleam in her eye. "But some people," she emphasized the words as if quoting the collective online voices, "think space exploration is a vanity project. Billions of dollars to float in a tin can while people on Earth are struggling. What do you say to that?" Sunita's eyes hardened. She had heard this line of attack before, but this time she was ready to shut it down once and for all. Taking a breath, she began, "You know, Chloe, that's a common misconception." Before she could finish, Chloe interrupted with a smirk. "I love misconceptions. Go on." Sunita smiled, but this time there was a razor-sharp edge to it. She knew how to play the game, and she was about to flip the script. "Let me tell you why every American should care about what happens up there." Sunita leaned back slightly in her chair, her composure unshaken as she met Chloe's amused gaze head-on. The audience sensed a shift. This wasn't just another celebrity playing defense. This was an astronaut who had spent more than 300 days in space, someone who had risked her life for the pursuit of knowledge. And she wasn't about to let a few cheap jokes undermine that. "You asked why Americans should care," Sunita began, her voice clear and measured. Let me break it down for you in ways everyone can understand because the work we do in space touches every part of your daily life. Chloe smirked. Really? I'm not exactly floating around in zero gravity over here, Sunita. A ripple of laughter ran through the crowd, but Sunita didn't flinch. She leaned in slightly, her voice unwavering. You ever use GPS to get to the studio, Chloe? The smirk faded just a little. Of course. Well, without the satellites we maintain in orbit, your GPS would be useless. No maps, no directions, nothing. Those satellites are monitored and adjusted using data from the International Space Station. She paused for effect. So, next time you find yourself lost in Manhattan, you can thank the tin can floating above Earth for guiding you home. A murmur of appreciation rippled through the crowd. And it's not just GPS, Sunita continued. Every time you check the weather, you rely on data collected by instruments on the ISS. When hurricane season hits, those satellites give us the ability to warn people days in advance, saving countless lives. So, while you might see astronauts floating around and think it's just a high-tech vacation, what we do up there protects and improves life down here. Chloe shifted in her seat but tried to hold her ground. Okay, fair point. But billions of dollars, Sunita. Couldn't that money be better spent fixing problems here on Earth instead of playing space cowboys? Sunita smiled, a knowing, patient smile. You know, people said the same thing during the Apollo missions. Why waste money going to the moon? But the technology we developed back then is why you have MRIs, pacemakers, and even the camera sensors in your phone today. Space isn't a distraction from solving problems, it's how we solve problems. The audience's reaction shifted. Heads were nodding now. Chloe's sarcastic edge seemed to dull under the weight of Sunita's unshakable logic. And let me tell you about medical research, Sunita continued, her voice gaining momentum. Microgravity allows us to study diseases in ways we simply can't on Earth. Right now, scientists are using data from the ISS to research cures for cancer, Alzheimer's, and osteoporosis. So, when someone mocks our struggles up there, I remind them those struggles might save a life down here. A few members of the audience clapped, louder this time, but Sunita wasn't finished. You know the funny thing, Chloe, she added, a slight smile on her lips. Every time a disaster hits, whether it's a wildfire in California or a flood in the Midwest, NASA's satellites are the first to provide life-saving information to emergency responders. I've seen firsthand how that data makes a difference. And trust me, when you're the one whose life is on the line, you're grateful for every dollar spent on space exploration. Chloe's confident facade cracked just a bit. She shifted again, her usual barrage of quips struggling to break through Sunita's calm authority. All right, Chloe said, raising her hands in mock surrender. I'll admit, you make a pretty compelling case. But there's still the whole you almost messed up thing. Doesn't that shake your confidence even a little? Sunita chuckled softly. If I let mistakes define me, Chloe, I wouldn't be sitting here today. Her smile faded into a more serious expression. Space isn't about perfection, it's about resilience. When something goes wrong up there, you can't call for backup. You rely on your training, your team, and your ability to think clearly under pressure. The audience was silent now, hanging on her every word. And for the record, Sunita added, her voice steelier, the robotic arm situation? We fixed it. Not because it was easy, but because that's what we do. We solve problems when no one else can. Chloe's grin faltered for the first time. She glanced at her cue cards as if searching for a comeback, but Sunita wasn't giving her a chance to regain control. You see, Chloe, Sunita continued, her eyes steady, when you're 250 miles above Earth, politics, sarcasm, and ego don't matter. What matters is the mission, the work that benefits every single person on this planet. And if someone wants to mock the struggles we face up there, I just remind myself, those struggles are the reason you get to sit here and enjoy your modern life. A thunderous round of applause broke out, no polite chuckles this time. Chloe's attempt to diminish Sunita had backfired spectacularly. And Sunita? She wasn't done schooling her yet. A few members of the audience clapped, louder this time, but Sunita wasn't finished. You know the funny thing, Chloe, she added, a slight smile on her lips. Every time a disaster hits, whether it's a wildfire in California or a flood in the Midwest, NASA's satellites are the first to provide life-saving information to emergency responders. I've seen firsthand how that data makes a difference. And trust me, when you're the one whose life is on the line, you're grateful for every dollar spent on space exploration. Chloe's confident facade cracked just a bit. She shifted again, her usual barrage of quips struggling to break through Sunita's calm authority. All right, Chloe said, raising her hands in mock surrender. I'll admit, you make a pretty compelling case. But there's still the whole you almost messed up thing. Doesn't that shake your confidence even a little? Sunita chuckled softly. If I let mistakes define me, Chloe, I wouldn't be sitting here today. Her smile faded into a more serious expression. Space isn't about perfection, it's about resilience. When something goes wrong up there, you can't call for backup. You rely on your training, your team, and your ability to think clearly under pressure. The audience was silent now, hanging on her every word. And for the record, Sunita added, her voice steelier, the robotic arm situation? We fixed it. Not because it was easy, but because that's what we do. We solve problems when no one else can. Chloe's grin faltered for the first time. She glanced at her cue cards as if searching for a comeback, but Sunita wasn't giving her a chance to regain control. You see, Chloe, Sunita continued, her eyes steady, when you're 250 miles above Earth, politics, sarcasm, and ego don't matter. What matters is the mission, the work that benefits every single person on this planet. And if someone wants to mock the struggles we face up there, I just remind myself, those struggles are the reason you get to sit here and enjoy your modern life. A thunderous round of applause broke out, no polite chuckles this time. Chloe's attempt to diminish Sunita had backfired spectacularly. As the applause rolled through the studio, Chloe Reynolds shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She had built a career on rattling high-profile guests, but tonight was different. Sunita Williams wasn't flustered, wasn't defensive, she was in command. And Chloe knew the audience could feel it. Still, Chloe wasn't ready to back down completely. She leaned forward, adopting a more serious tone. Okay, Sunita, I'll give you this, you've got grit. But let's talk about the human side. There were reports that you struggled emotionally during this mission. Isolation, stress, even some tension with your crewmates. What do you say to people who think maybe, just maybe, you're not as tough as you seem? For the briefest moment, the studio felt impossibly quiet. Sunita let the question hang, her eyes steady and calm. You know, Chloe, she began softly, I'm glad you asked that. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had faced her demons and come out stronger. Space isn't just a physical test. It's mental, emotional. And yes, it's hard. But what I've learned is that real strength isn't about pretending everything's perfect. It's about showing up even when it isn't. She paused, her words deliberate. Imagine waking up every day knowing that one wrong decision, one error, could cost you and your crew your lives. Imagine missing birthdays, holidays, the simple warmth of human touch. There's no stepping outside for fresh air. No walking away when things get tough. You either face it or you fail. A hush fell over the audience. Sunita wasn't just talking about space anymore. She was talking about the human experience, about what it means to endure. And I did struggle, she admitted, her voice never wavering. I missed my family. There were days when the isolation felt unbearable. But giving up? That was never an option. Not when there were people counting on me. Not when I had a job to do. Chloe tried to interject, but Sunita wasn't finished. You see, Chloe, resilience isn't about never feeling weak. It's about choosing to be strong when it matters most. And I carry that lesson with me whether I'm floating above the earth or sitting right here in front of you. For the first time all night, Chloe seemed at a loss for words. The playful glint in her eyes faded as she leaned back in her chair, absorbing Sunita's words. The audience, once eager to laugh along with the host, now sat in rapt attention, moved by the astronaut's raw honesty. And one more thing, Sunita added, her voice sharp with purpose. When people question whether I'm too soft for this job, I remind them the only reason they get to ask those questions is because people like me are willing to do the work they never could. A wave of applause erupted, louder and more genuine than before. Chloe opened her mouth to respond, but Sunita's quiet intensity had shifted the entire room's energy. There was no clever comeback for that. For a moment, all Chloe Reynolds could do was sit there, her signature smugness replaced by something resembling humility. She had invited Sunita Williams onto the night spot expecting an easy target, a headline-grabbing clash where her biting sarcasm would win the day. Instead, the astronaut had turned the interview into a lesson in grit, purpose, and patriotism, and the audience was clearly on her side. Still, Chloe wasn't known for giving up easily. She adjusted her posture and flashed a tense smile, trying to claw back control. All right, Sunita, she said, her tone sharper now. You've made space sound like the noblest calling in the world, but let's be real. A lot of people think astronauts are just overglorified technicians in fancy suits. Aren't you just following instructions from mission control? How much of what you do is actually, I don't know, impressive? A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some chuckled, but others bristled at Chloe's dismissiveness. Sunita didn't flinch. You know, Sunita said, her voice cooler now, I hear that a lot from people who've never actually done anything that pushes human limits. The audience gasped softly. Chloe's jaw tightened, but Sunita wasn't done. Let me ask you something, Chloe, Sunita continued, her tone razor-sharp. When was the last time you spent 7 hours outside a spaceship tethered by nothing but a thin cable fixing a malfunction that could destroy a $150 billion station? Or worked through a solar flare alert knowing radiation could cook you from the inside out if you didn't get back to the airlock in time? Chloe blinked, visibly taken aback. And while we're at it, Sunita added, her voice rising just a touch, how often do you practice emergency scenarios where you've got 30 seconds to correct a failure, or you and your entire crew burn up re-entering Earth's atmosphere? The audience burst into applause, loud and fierce. Chloe shifted uncomfortably, realizing the conversation was no longer under her control. And no, Sunita continued, her expression hardening, I don't just follow orders. When something breaks 250 miles above Earth, there's no help coming. We think on our feet. We innovate. We make decisions no computer or command center could. And you know what? We do it knowing there's no margin for error because up there, mistakes mean death. Chloe tried to keep her composure. Okay, but... And another thing, Sunita cut her off, her voice like steel. It's easy to sit in a studio and poke fun at people who do difficult things. But while you're here making jokes, there are men and women, people like me, who put their lives on the line to expand human knowledge. Not because it's easy, but because it's worth it. The applause swelled again, longer, louder. This time, there was no trace of irony or sarcasm. Chloe shifted her cue cards nervously as Sunita leaned back, calm as ever. And if that's not impressive to you, Sunita said quietly, I don't know what is. For the first time that night, Chloe Reynolds seemed at a loss. She adjusted her microphone as the applause died down, her bravado visibly cracked. Trying to recover, she forced a smile. All right, she said, lifting her hands in mock surrender. I think we get it, you're a space badass. But tell me this, she paused, her voice softening just a touch. Why do you still do it? After everything, the danger, the pressure, why keep going back? Sunita's expression softened, and for a moment, the steel gave way to something else, passion. Because someone has to, she said, her voice steady. Someone has to push the limits of what's possible. Someone has to ask the big questions about life, the universe, our place in it. And if people like me stop, who's going to carry that torch? The audience fell silent, hanging on her every word. When I'm up there, Sunita continued, her voice low and powerful, I'm not just doing it for NASA. I'm doing it for every kid who dreams big but is told they're not smart enough, strong enough, or brave enough. I'm doing it for every American who believes that exploration, no matter how hard, is still worth it. Her words hung heavy in the air, undeniable and true. And one day, she added, her eyes locked on Chloe's, when we set foot on Mars, when we cure diseases we thought were impossible, or when a young girl watches an astronaut and thinks, I can do that, that's when you'll understand why I keep going back. The studio erupted in applause, a standing ovation. People cheered, not just for her words, but for everything she stood for. Chloe tried to laugh it off, but the power dynamic had shifted irrevocably. The audience wasn't on her side anymore, they were with Sunita. And the message was clear, you don't mock someone who has the courage to do what others can't. As the thunderous applause echoed through the studio, Chloe Reynolds struggled to maintain her signature smirk. But the truth was undeniable, Sunita Williams had just owned the room. The audience wasn't laughing at Sunita's struggles anymore. Instead, they were looking at her with something Chloe hadn't expected, admiration. And whether she liked it or not, Chloe knew the narrative had slipped from her grasp. But still, Chloe was nothing if not stubborn. She adjusted her microphone, trying one last time to regain the upper hand. Okay, Sunita, she said, forcing a light tone. You've definitely made your case. But let's be honest, there's a lot of talk about astronauts being heroes. Do you really think you're that different from the rest of us? Sunita smiled, a patient, almost teacher-like smile. She wasn't angry. If anything, she seemed to understand what Chloe was really asking. Let me tell you a story, Sunita said, her voice soft but commanding. When I was a little girl, I wasn't supposed to be here. I wasn't a prodigy. I wasn't the smartest kid in the room. My parents were immigrants who believed in hard work and education. But nothing about my background screamed, future astronaut. The room fell quiet, the audience leaning in. But you know what I did have? Sunita continued. Curiosity, determination, and a belief that I belonged in any room I worked hard enough to enter. I wasn't born different. I became different by choosing to never quit. Chloe, sensing the gravity of Sunita's words, didn't interrupt this time. I failed plenty of times, Sunita admitted. I was rejected. I made mistakes. I questioned myself, especially in space when the pressure was enough to break anyone. But here's the thing, Chloe, failure doesn't define you. How you respond to it does. A ripple of agreement passed through the crowd. And that's why I'm here, she said, her voice filled with quiet conviction. Not because I'm a hero, not because I'm perfect, but because every time I fell, I got back up. And if that makes me different, it's only because I refused to accept limits, whether they came from society or from myself. The audience broke into another round of applause, but this time, it felt personal. Sunita wasn't just defending herself anymore. She was speaking to everyone who had ever faced doubt. Chloe took a breath, her sarcasm now replaced by something that almost resembled respect. I've got to admit, Sunita, she said, her voice softer than before. You've given me a lot to think about. Maybe it's easier to mock from down here, but what you do is not easy. And I guess it takes a certain kind of person to keep going back. Sunita gave a small, knowing smile. It does. But here's the thing, Chloe, we all have that strength inside us. You don't have to go to space to prove it. You just have to be willing to stand up when things get hard and say, I'm not done yet. The audience erupted into applause. A standing ovation, louder and longer than before. Even Chloe seemed to feel the impact, rising from her seat and offering Sunita a handshake. You know, Chloe said with a faint smile, I think I finally get why they send you up there. And why's that? Sunita asked, raising an eyebrow. Because, Chloe admitted, when everything's on the line, you're exactly the person I'd want in charge. The audience cheered as the lights dimmed, marking the end of an interview that no one, least of all Chloe Reynolds, would soon forget. And as Sunita Williams walked off the stage, her head held high, the message she left behind was crystal clear.